Yeah, you're all set.
Okay, very good. Good evening, all. Welcome to the meeting of the Kennebunkport Growth Planning Committee for February 6, 2024. We'll start off, as always, with the introduction of members and guests. So, do we go right to left at the board?
You mean me? Dan?
Yeah.
Oh, Galen Weidley, Director of Planning and Development for the town of Kennebunkport.
Very
Liz
good.
Johnson. Mary Beth Gilbert, Select Board Member.
Jane Evelyn.
Good evening, all. This is Dan Saunders on the Growth Planning Committee. So we'll start off with our agenda. I do see we have two guests attending. Carol and Robin, you're both welcome. When you want to join in or have a comment, feel free to just raise your hands and we'll acknowledge you and have you talk to us. So appreciate you joining. So for the minutes, our first option is review and approve minutes from January 16th. So Liz, thanks for presenting those. Take a motion from a board member?
Am I allowed to motion my own meetings?
No, you probably
Minutes?
should.
So I move that we accept the minutes.
Yeah. I'll second that with just the one correction. It looks like there's can't make a non-conforming more non-conforming, there was a C instead of an N, so.
Oh, what?
Conforming versus non-conforming, there's an N missing.
Oh,
Yeah, it was con-conforming, so we wanted a con. Just adjust that. Thank you very much. All right, so next on our agenda is to continue our discussion of the LDU land use ordinances due to the changes in LD 2003, and specifically delve into the dwellings, the 2 to 4 units. So let's see. Can you take this through the discussion there, Galen?
Sure, Dan. I submitted for you all some feedback. We did submit this proposed language to the Select Board. They had a very good discussion. There was some good public feedback, and some planning board members were also in attendance and provided their feedback as well from their perspective when it comes to the planning board. And so it was agreed to invite the planning board here to be part of the process. The Board of Selectmen would like the Growth Planning Committee to iron out the finer details of the proposed amendments, which are in front of you tonight. And there were some questions that were asked or some useful research that was discovered by staff, which is in the memo that's outlined in front of you. So what you're looking to do tonight is to go over again, it's the sections that you've already sent to the Board of Selectmen. If there's any other fine details you'd like to make changes, now's the time to do it before the attorney for the town irons out those finer details to the Select Board before it goes to a town vote. If there's time remaining, certainly you can discuss the other section, which is the dwellings portion. So if you have your packet, it should be laid out in chronological order based off the sections. There was some suggested amendment language that was added, if you'd like me to shepherd you through that process.
Yeah.
For the different sections that were proposed by some planning board members, and there was some suggested language as well from staff. So I'm willing to go over each individual sections. If you want me to go over the memo itself with some of the questions that were raised or some things you've asked us to look into, I'm more than happy to do whatever you'd like at this point.
Yeah, I would suggest that we do that, that we walk through that. It'll also be for the benefit of those who are watching as well.
and could we also take some time to go through the answers to the front part of the document that you forwarded all of us with the discussion at the library, the bold
Oh, the memo? Yep.
memo?
Yep. Whatever,
I-
whatever you would want to start first. If you want to start with the memo first, and then we'll just keep going page by page, I can do that. Is that?
Sounds like a good approach.
Okay. So staff met with Maine DECD representatives in the town of Grapes Public Library. We discussed specifically the 2 to 4 unit land use amendment. Staff looked over the proposed LD 2003 statutory language requirements for what's required of municipalities versus what is in our existing code. What we discovered was this law requires that all municipalities have to allow for 2 dwelling units or duplexes, as they're most likely referred to, on vacant parcels throughout the town. That's not an issue for our zoning. Every zone allows for a duplex or 2-family development style in our zoning, so that's not an issue. Where we have to make some changes, and again, this is later down the road, and we haven't sent this amendment language to the Board of Selectmen yet because again, the Growth Planning Committee wants to mull this over, is the second portion, which is dealing with who gets the 4 units on a vacant structure. And so this is in any areas where multifamily is allowed, or with the growth area, if public infrastructure is available. And so I did a little diagram because I'm a very visual person. I think it's helpful for educational and public outreach as well. You'll notice in your packet, there are 2 documents. One is a bucket that was handed out to the state. This is how they explain the different statutory requirements that municipalities need to comply with. And then the next one is the visual that the staff has come up with. And this is, again, to help people visualize, okay, what zones in our area allow for multiplex, which is our apartments, the multifamily, and which ones are in the growth area, and then where do they intersect and where do they overlap. And so you'll see on this handout sheet, to explain it to individuals, we only have one zone, and it's the Village Residential East, and it's a part that's outside the growth area. That's zone multiplex, but it's not in the growth area. And so in that case, they need to be on adequate public water and sewer for that particular area.
So that's what I didn't understand. So is that part of, so is Village Residential E
That's east, yep.
considered part of the,
It's part, yeah, the zone's broken up. Some of it's in the growth area, some of it's not, when you look at the zone, where it's laid out. I don't know why the town decided that, but that's. it's
so
just-
some of Village Residential East is in the growth area and some isn't?
Yep,
Okay, and so the part that isn't,
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to have affordable housing?
so if you look at that bucket, so the affordable housing bucket, on that, it says the development must be located in an area zoned for multifamily housing, and it has to have one of the 2. It either has to be in a designated growth area, or it needs to be on a water or sewer or comparable system. So that's the language that is used for the affordable housing piece, the density bonus. And this is for a density bonus for affordable housing.
Okay, so I think this is where I got messed up at the select board, and when I reread it, I got messed up again.
Okay,
So, for example, and I brought up Goose Rocks Beach on sewer, so it meets the third bullet. It's not a growth area, but it is served by water and sewer.
correct.
But, so then why is that not per this?
Because it's not, we don't allow multiplexes in the Goose Rocks Beach.
Okay,
Yep. And it's not in the growth area, so that's the other 2 caveats.
but it is, but it doesn't have to be in the growth area. It just, per the discussion we just had on Village Residential East, that portion of it that's not in the growth area still can have affordable housing because it is where we allow multifamily housing, and it hits the third one, which is the water and sewer.
So in Goose Rocks Beach, they're not allowed zoned, they're not zoned for multifamily, multiplex,
Yep.
and they're not in the growth area.
But what I was saying was,
Is there a way I can ask a question?
Yeah.
sure,
When you go to the mic,
Yes.
yeah, please.
we have someone that transcribes, just FYI, we have someone that transcribes the minutes, so they need to make sure the recording, they can hear.
Sure, yeah. No, I'm Ed Francis. I live at 2 Touchstone Drive, and I'm a member of the planning board. I appreciate the invitation to come tonight. I will just, I agree with Ms. Gilbert that it's important that we understand the wording of the law. It says we're multifamily housing. It doesn't say multiplexes. It says we're multifamily. I haven't seen anywhere where that doesn't include duplexes. A
So-
two-family home is a multi-family home, correct?
Right.
More than one.
No, so I'll correct that. In your land use code, there's a definition for two-family dwelling, and there's a different definition for multiplex.
That's correct, there
Yeah.
is. And they are both multi-family. There's a two-family and there's a multiplex. They are both more than one. So I think we need to be careful here. Maybe this, and if you look online, different towns and different federal agencies have used 3 or more, 4 or more as multifamily for affordable housing. Some use more than one. So I think that we're not on quite, I don't think we're quite on solid ground by saying that multiplex equals multifamily.
I'll disagree with you, but yes,
I haven't seen anything in the guidance from DECD that clarifies this. We don't have a definition. And in the absence of a definition, at least we should consider that the broader definition, more than one, is multi. We need to allow for that possibility. If you want to be more restrictive than that, I think we need to get a ruling from legal.
So if I go down, and I don't mean to, I'm just trying to make sure I can run some of this stuff to ground and understand it. Because, so for example, if I go back to the back roads of Goose Rocks Beach, there's buildings that have 2 separate entrances. They're one building on a piece of land. Some are condoized or whatever, so they are, when I read this, I think of them as multi-family,
Two-family.
multifamily.
I know it's not zoned for multiplexes. It's not zoned for a structure that has 3 or more dwellings in it. There may be grandfathered situations where there are what we would today call a multiplex, but if you were to go.
But this doesn't say multiplex. If I'm reading the stuff in front of
It
me,
says
it's
where it's zoned for multifamily.
multifamily.
And to me, that includes a two-family. And Goose Rocks is zoned to allow two-family homes.
Right.
Every
so
zone is.
So Goose Rocks has condominiumized areas. So when as a layperson, when I read this.
I'm with you.
I'm like, okay, if I just came in from developers that are gonna come in and argue in front of you guys, the planning board, I would say I'm in an area where there's multifamily housing. And it's not in our growth area, but as we walk through this, you had to fill that one, and then you had to be on sewer, and those are on sewer. So I keep going back to this, because I just want to make sure that we can run it to ground, and I don't want us to trip
I'm
up.
I'm
And I
agreeing.
don't want the planning board to be sit there caught when like 4 lawyers show up and say, nope, this is the law, this is the ordinance.
So we're talking specifically about, is there a possibility that someone could interpret this law to say that the density bonus could be earned or qualified in Goose Rocks?
And for me specifically, it's, when I first read the LD 2003, which was like 4 or 5 pages, it specifically said growth area for affordable housing. And when we first started to talk, that was where I hung my hat. It's like, first and foremost, it had to be in the growth area. And then when I read these 3 silos, the growth area actually comes the 3rd point down, and you had a foul, you could get there by multifamily, So if I took my little shoe and went around the Monopoly board, I could get there by hitting multifamily, I get a chance
Yeah.
card. And then I could hit on sewer,
I agree.
and I'm in Goose Rocks. So
you're
how
saying
does
that
how do I not get the
There's
goal?
areas of Goose Rocks that are on public
Yeah,
water and sewer,
right.
and it's zoned for two-family. Seems to me that there's an argument that you could earn the density bonus. Now, is there a lot available in Goose Rocks that would allow you to put the density per dwelling unit, which for Goose Rocks is what? Is it
It's 40,000, it's an acre, I think.
20,000 per,
No,
40,000.
40.
for a single-family home? What does it have for a multiplex? Oh, it's not available for a multiplex. So you could put a duplex there,
You can put a two-family dwelling,
and how much per dwelling unit on a
20,000
two-family?
per dwelling unit.
Say again?
20,000 per dwelling.
All right, so on an acre, you could put a two-family home.
Yep.
2 dwelling units.
That's allowed right now. Yep.
So
Right.
to make this worth someone's while, to get the density bonus, to say you're gonna put,
Why wouldn't
you
we,
have to do a development, right?
why wouldn't we in our ordinance put it the way that we
Oh, I think-
internalize it, which is affordable housing can go in the growth area?
Right.
Why don't we just clear that instead of,
Because the state law says there's a specific provision that it does say the affordable housing, the municipality shall allow affordable housing development where multifamily dwellings are allowed to have a dwelling unit density of 2.5 times as otherwise, and the location may not require more than 2 off-street parking. The development must also be in a designated growth area or consistent with the, and it's the section about the comparable water or sewer system. So, it has to meet your lot requirements, so it can't, you know, it gets the density over top of that. So if it's
Yeah.
a non-conforming lot, they can't do it. But I will say that this came up in conversation in Gray Public Library, and I was sitting around other planners and code officers asking these questions, and we said, is it 3 or more units? And that's what they stated. Because that's
Yeah.
multifamily. That's not,
say that again, please?
it was 3 or more units is considered multifamily if it's on a
Right.
structure.
So we should have that definition somewhere in our ordinance?
We call it a multiplex, is what we define
So
it.
we should say that's our definition of multifamily then.
If you want to go through the land use code and make all these changes, we can do that.
No,
But no,
you just
can't
put
we
in the
just-
definition.
Can't we just say in a definition part of the land use, just say multifamily
4,
equals
3 or more.
multiplex, wherever referred to?
Of course.
Orange equals blue.
That's a good recommendation. I believe reading through LD 2003 and the guidance they provided, it infers that it's 3 or more. But we should state that in our
I looked,
definition of multiplex, that it's,
I looked hard for that and couldn't find it in writing, but
Yeah,
I think
it's-
we should say it,
no, I think we should say it.
yeah,
And LD 2003 does not define it,
correct.
but they do talk about it as being like a multifamily dwelling are allowed to have dwelling unit density of 2.5 times. And it goes on to talk about off-street parking and 2 off-street parking for every 3 units.
And-
So
good-
it implies it's 3.
Excellent point, and if you go
Right.
look at the HUD website, you'll see that, in general, the affordable housing that they're talking about is for 3 or more.
Right,
So that's all consistent.
right.
So once you do that, then Goose Rocks is off the table,
Right.
because it is not zoned for multiplexes, which is 3 or more,
Yes,
okay? It's not we just define multifamily to be 3 or more.
yes.
Which
I'm
is-
always hesitant because I know the people that will come into our town and they're very smart people.
You gotta get this by legal, but I think as long as we're clear, then we know what we're trying to do.
Yep.
And I think it's also reasonable. I don't think we're being tricky here. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a site that had enough room in Goose Rocks to have a bunch of two-family homes that would constitute something that would be arguably an affordable development.
I could think of,
Well,
Okay,
it's not growth.
Some do.
It's not a
They
growth
do a
area,
2-hour
so you can't
firewall
have the
separation.
affordable,
yeah.
you can
Housing.
if it's served by public water and sewer.
not for the affordable housing density bonus.
Or a comparable
I
system.
think you can.
So if
You
it's
have to
in-
have a comparable system where it has
Yeah,
to
if
be
it's
in
in
the,
it has a comparable system, it is allowed.
I guess, so you're
Must
saying
be served
those
by a
areas where
public,
it's served
special
by
district, or
sewer.
other centrally
Yes,
managed
so
water
that's
system.
why I think all the more reason is where it's important that we say our definition of multifamily is consistent with an awful lot of other places. It's three or more, and that's consistent, as you say, with the parking, that implies that that's what they had in mind as well.
So the area between Route 9 and Goose Rocks Beach, between
Where the hotel was there
between New Bedford and Dyke. You know, so that strip of land there, all that mass.
fair point.
So that mass of land, per our current ordinances, does or does not allow multiplexes.
It does not. I'll tell you that multiplexes are allowed in 5 zones. Village Residential, Residential East, Dock Square, Riverfront, and Cape Porpoise Square.
Thank you. Okay, so then that, as long as we did the equals, multi versus multifamily equals, and definition zone land.
And I
You
think,
have
Galen,
other
I see,
requirements in for multiplex, like there can only be so many units per structure. So there's yeah.
Multiple things
Yeah,
in the multiplex.
yeah,
See what I did there?
yep.
Sure.
Hello?
Go Robin.
Yes, hello, thank you. I have a couple of questions and I have this packet, I've been reading it and I've been reading it for quite a while. And what would be really helpful is if you just did the math for us. So, for example, this situation we're talking about in the Goose Rock zone. I don't see anywhere it says just the growth area for all this. So for instance, if you could have it a duplex in the Goose Rock zone as long as it was on sewer and have affordable density bonus. So I think if you added another column to each of these tables saying extrapolate exactly under LD 2003, how many units would be allowed? Because doing all this, I mean, if Mr. Francis is still puzzled and he has a very good idea of what's going on and still,
Got her fooled.
I'm not totally understanding. I would just like an example. What we're just talking about, the bottom line is per lot, say it's an acre, how many in a multiplex zone can we have? You know what I mean? It would be nice for the public to be able to see the actual number of units in each of these zones. Because even when you have been following this, it's still kind of nebulous. And I think Mr. Francis is right. We want to be careful, and Mary Beth is trying to clear this up. So a good way for the public to understand would be to actually put the numbers of units in there, because I think that tells the story a little better than, trying to say, is it on sewer, is it on septic? We need a little bit more of a table like that.
So Robin,
Yeah?
this is Ed. Let me
Ed.
respond to that. If we all agree that multifamily is equivalent to what we call a multiplex, it's 3 or more, then that automatically, growth area aside, that automatically limits you to 5 zones. Goose Rocks is not one of them, because multiplexes, 3 or more, are only allowed in those 5 zones.
And in Goose Rocks, you can have a duplex, so
That's right.
that that could come under the density bonus too. So on an acre,
No.
That's what I
You
don't,
get-
no, that's what I'm saying. I think we're agreeing here tonight. It does not come under the definition.
Well,
The
we're-
multifamily, specifically, we interpret that to mean 3 or more, not 2.
Right, but I think right
Right.
now, we're just speaking specifically for the bucket that Galen was taking us through, the first one, which was the affordable housing density bonus.
Right.
I think Robin started to bring in like the 2 to 4 units, which we haven't gotten to yet.
Oh. I
well,
missed-
that's the density bonus. I'm sorry if I got ahead
Yes,
of that.
just, it's just
but it-
density bonus. Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay, and one more point, the shoreland zone has, so how does LD 2003, it says, land use activities within the shoreland zone shall conform to the minimum lot size and shore frontage requirements set forth in, 240-4.16. So my understanding, because I live in the shoreland zone, is that even for an ADU, I need a complete another lot.
No.
So that's what Werner told me a year ago. So have things changed?
So Robin, when you say you're in the shoreland zone, you're in
Yeah.
you're in a non-overlay zone first and foremost, right?
Yeah.
Remember, so what zone is that?
Well, I'm in the shoreland zone, and I think the shoreland zone is throughout town, anywhere you're
Yeah.
such a
We-
distance,
we-
correct?
We call it an overlay zone. In other words, it's not a base zone. It's not one of the zones and then.
Right.
It's not like Goose Rocks or Village Residential.
Correct.
When you go say, I live in the Village Residential zone, then a portion of that, the areas that are, within 250 feet of the shoreline, et cetera, they are
Right.
overlaid by the shoreland zone. And there's restrictions. There's a whole section 5 of the land use ordinance that says what happens if I'm in that overlay. But
Right.
the
I didn't-
underlying zone is the first thing we deal with.
Okay, so
And Robin, you're
I
correct.
do understand that.
The accessory apartments do have a provision that allows accessory apartments are not permitted in the shoreland zone unless the lot in which they are located has at least double the lot size for that zone, double the minimum lot size, and double the shore frontage for that zone.
Okay, correct.
So that's
That's the
still there.
way, right. So this LD, we're gonna be limited by this because there is quite a bit of land in the shoreland zone. So say you're in Village Residential in the shoreland zone, even though, multiplex or whatever is allowed there, you still would have to have triple the land, correct?
You just started into multiplexes. You
Right.
lost us.
Okay, so if and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm just trying to understand. But say, in the Cape Corpus Square or say,
Yep.
Riverfront zone, okay, that's in the, the green zone there. So if they are also in the shoreland zone,
Right?
which law is stronger? So the shoreland zone would require 3 times as much land, right?
So
Even if you're in,
My understanding is that the shoreline zone would have precedent.
I agree with that.
Right.
That LD 2003 can't override what's been for the
And I think
shoreline zone. Is that correct, Galen?
Yep.
Okay.
okay,
But there are areas in Goose Rocks Beach that are not in the shoreline.
absolutely,
Like in my neighborhood down there,
Sure.
we
absolutely.
have, part of our housing area is in shoreland and 3/4 of it isn't. So those would all be able to go directly to goal and get ADUs if they so choose, under this new,
In every,
well, actually,
right
currently,
now, I believe,
right now.
unless
are allowed
somebody helps
everywhere.
me understand otherwise, I think our land use ordinance today already
Yep,
Yes.
is in agreement with LD 2003 with respect to ADUs. There may be some nuance that I'm missing, but there certainly was a concerted effort to do that in advance. So, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
yeah, Warner did work on that before
Yeah,
he left.
yeah.
So they
So
updated
if
most
there's
of that.
something
Yep.
that needs to be tweaked and all, but by and large, that was done. And every base zone, forget about the overlay for a second, allows a single-family home to have an ADU.
Yep.
Now, the shoreland restrictions that are levied on the base, on the structure that's already there, and that would be levied against any addition that was put onto that structure, that doesn't go away. So if you're gonna put in an ADU on a home that's in the shoreland overlay, well, if it's inside the house, you're probably okay. But if you're gonna try to put in another structure, you're gonna trip over what Galen was just reading to us. It says, no, there's no room to do that. You can't increase the coverage on that lot. It's in the shoreland zone. You're gonna make it more non-conforming, so you need another one.
And so then if I go back to your circle, your Venn diagram, the yellow part, Village Residential East is in the multiplex. So therefore, it takes it ticks the first box, and it can get hooked up to sewer. So it ticks the second part of that box, but it just happens not to be in the growth area. So it meets 2 of the 3 requirements.
Right.
Got
So
it?
you just flip back to density bonus.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, to
Yep.
yeah, to affordable housing. Right.
And I'm saying that only because I wrestled with this.
Yeah.
I spent a day and a half trying to get myself smart enough to feel like I could come to this meeting. I mean, obviously, you guys have been, you're 5 steps ahead of me, at least. But I spent some time reading the law, reading, the supporting documents, reading what Galen had already put out. And I found that if I didn't constantly remind myself to go back and say, wait a minute, first of all, I'm gonna talk about the density bonus. Then I'm gonna go separately look at ADUs, and then I'm gonna go separately look at the third bucket. Because the law treats them differently, and then at the very end, you go back and you say, well, wait a minute, there is some back and forth here. We're gonna talk about double dipping, for example, and this type of thing. So there's some interaction, but I strongly suggested that if you're like me at all, keeping those buckets separate and understanding them first in isolation, that'll help us enormously.
So are there any more questions for the affordable housing bonus bucket? Any questions on that perspective?
So I'm just trying to go back to your
Yep.
Venn, make sure I get the clarity.
Yeah.
So I have, is a zone multiplex, that's how we get residential E
Yep,
in.
and they're
Village-
outside the growth area.
And they're outside the growth area. And then you have all these that are the 4 that are in the growth area, so
Yep.
they get that. And then the green just says,
They're the overlap. So they're the ones that have zone multiplex and they're in the growth area.
okay, so we have, oh, okay, I see, because Village Residential E is part
Yep, there's part of it.
1 and part is in the, both, and then 1 is only in, it's the multiplex ding, okay.
Yep.
And then Dark Square is both, Cape Porpoise is both.
So there's a part of Village Residential that is not in the growth area,
Yep.
and it has water and sewer?
You have to have water and sewer.
Yeah,
It
but,
might not, yeah.
see,
Yeah.
I read portions of the comprehensive plan, which is an amazing document, by the way. And it said, I think, that our growth area is unchanged by this latest revision that came out, and it's largely predicated on what in 2009 was our growth area, which was everything that was served by public water and sewer, or within 1,000 feet of it. Could be readily attached to it. And once you do
That's right.
that, it sort of, gives you a thought as to, oh, yeah, that's why it's the lower part of the map, and it's sort of a contiguous area. I got tripped up by Goose Rocks Beach.
Yeah.
I didn't reckon with that, but,
That's in
Yeah,
the
we
transition.
excluded Goose Rock Beach from that.
no, I understand
Assessment.
why. I just
Yep.
had it in my head that it was largely the same thing as saying water and sewer, but it's, with that's the exception. So if I look at Village Residential East, my first guess would be that there's a section of it that isn't served by water and sewer, or within 1,000 feet of it, and that's probably the, you know, the yellow part
Yeah.
here.
It's a small portion, it's not overly large.
And it's really nice, when you're trying to apply and enforce this code, that it is a sort of a consistent and coherent vision that you can hold in your head. Yeah, it makes sense. The growth area is largely tied to water and sewer, and, you know, if we can think about it in these broad terms, I think it's going to be manageable. If it's dots on a map, it's going to be hard to defend, and it's going to be hard to enforce.
Okay. You want me to still go through the memo, or? Okay, next part is about double dipping. So again, I didn't want to go into too much detail, because I know this is going to be probably messing some things, so we're going to go into the bucket. We're going to go into two buckets, sadly, but we're going to go into a bucket. We're going to go into the accessory dwelling units. And so there was the concern about, what happens if, can I double dip if I have a two-family and I want to add another accessory apartment? And so state law addressed this issue of double dipping, about going back and forth between the uses, and we can clarify that you can't keep going back and forth between, I want 2 this year, and then I actually can do 3, and so I'm going to change it, and I'm going to, come back later and try to make it a 3rd. And so that helped to clarify that accessory apartment and the 3 additional units. You can either get the accessory apartment if you have a single-family dwelling, or you can decide to add those 2 additional dwellings to the property. You can't go back and forth. That's allowed under the state law.
So for a person that has, so we've had accessory apartments in our code now for a while. So does that mean that anyone with an accessory apartment today sort of forfeits their ability for the additional dwellings? Or can I go back and destroy my accessory building, my accessory dwelling, and say, I've demoed that, I got my demo permit, demoed that, and then come back to the board and say, I'm now back, I've gone back to 1 unit.
Yep.
So is that allowable?
So that does come up in the 2 to 4 unit discussion that we're, I know we're not
Yeah.
sending that language forward, but that you can stipulate the date of when that parcel, whatever was on that parcel at that date. So if they do decide to demolish everything, because, in this law, it says a vacant lot can go up to 4 if you're in the growth area.
Right,
But if it's not a vacant, it can only go up to 3.
right.
So, if you didn't put language in there, it says, okay, at this date, and you'll see it says July 1st in your
Yeah.
ordinance. If it says this date, you destroy all the structures, you don't get the bonus. You can only go up to 3 if that's what you want. So you can certainly do that. You have the ability to stop. It's optional. You don't have to. You could just do whatever's existing on the property. But I thought it'd be better to put some kind of parameters in this.
And so your parameters suggested are that we put the date in that says, as of this date, whatever's on your property is as of your property.
Yep.
So if you had a ADU on your property, you didn't destroy it before July 1st, 2024, or whatever the date is. I think Paul was asking if we could go back to 23 or something on that one. But, yeah, okay. So then that means that the person is now ADU and not able to do additional
Right.
houses.
Can I,
Because all the law says is if you have a single-family dwelling, you can go up to on your parcel 3 additional units anywhere in your community. Doesn't matter.
can we,
You have to meet the density. You have to meet the density for that area.
yeah,
But you do have that ability that you can go up to 3. But
Yeah.
that ADU sort of trumps that. You can stop it.
Okay, so the ADU is the trump, okay, that's good, okay.
can I for a minute, just, I know that it seems like this, the density bonus and the ability to put up to 4 structures, more dwellings on your property is coloring our thinking about ADUs. They're coupled. The thing about, that I'm reading about the density bonus is it says that any additional dwellings need to be consistent with that the town can put in a density requirement in, which we've already done.
We have, yeah.
We've already said, pick a zone, pick village residential, just for a minute, that a dwelling unit needs, a single-family dwelling unit needs 40,000 square feet, right? And if it's a multiplex, it needs 20,000 per dwelling. So if you had a 3-unit one, you need 60,000 square feet. So I need to have a pretty good-sized lot before I can put 4 units on one that already has 1 on it, or that has none on it, right? If I wanted to put 4 multiplexes on a lot, I would need, well, 4 times an acre and a half. What's that? You do the math, is that 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, a 6-acre lot. So if you did that, you're probably putting multiplexes down there, right? But if you didn't, if you thought, okay, I have a lot that's 6 acres and I want to go put 4 single-family homes on it, or 6 single-family homes on it, why would we care whether each one of those put an ADU on it as well? You know, why restrict that?
From an enforcement perspective, I mean, yes, you can do water and,
It has to meet.
Right, it has to meet all
You have
that.
to be able to serve and all of that. Sure, all of those restrictions still apply, but
Yep.
if those were individual 1-acre lots, we'd put an ADU, allow an ADU on each one of them. Why do we want to be more restrictive if somehow it's, not that I think anyone's going to do this, by the way, but somehow
I
got their
foresee
density
that someone
bonus.
could potentially decide to put that in and then,
Six single-family homes,
yep, on a single parcel, and then say, hey, I want to put 6 more ADUs on,
one on each.
yep, 1 each, yep.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
6 additional, so that's 12 now on a
Why is that
parcel.
worse than if it had been a development to begin with?
Because you're having this type of growth occur outside of your normal parameters of the community, correct, in the rural district in different low-density areas? Is that where we want to encourage that type
Wait a
of?
minute, it's got to be in the growth area.
No, not for ADUs.
No,
No, the density bonus, you talked about double dipping, that's
Yeah.
why I'm bringing you back to growth areas.
so which density bonus are you talking about? Because we're in, or which bucket
So
are you
there's,
in?
yeah,
There's only one density bonus,
no,
right?
Galen was talking about the 2 to 4 units.
Right,
Yeah, that's the density bonus.
No,
no,
there's,
it's affordable housing density bonus.
which is 2.5
You gotta remember
times.
which bucket,
I
what
see,
bucket are we talking
okay,
about?
language, yeah,
Yeah.
no, I got you.
So we call it affordable housing as one
Yes.
bucket,
Right.
and then there's we call it affordable housing, and that relates to 2.5 times
Yes, yes, yes,
density.
Yeah.
The ADUs, which is
Multiple dwellings, if you will, yeah.
go around, all areas.
Okay.
And then we talk about the we named it, the 2 to 4. So that's how we've,
I know that language isn't going forward yet. I mean, we can discuss
no,
that
no,
tonight.
but
No,
it
no,
helps
but-
Yeah.
us, it's helping with the broader,
Yep.
What's
you
happened
sort
at
of have
least,
to tap into it because you have to know where the ADUs can and can't go, or, you just sort of have to understand the broader picture a little bit.
the language will be important, because, I mean, I've seen it, it's tripped me up tonight. It was, when Robin was speaking earlier, it was, we're not all talking about the same thing, we're arguing with each other, and sometimes it seems like, oh, no, you meant that? Oh, I'm sorry. I was arguing a different point entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, we need to get out of that mode.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We thought it'd be
it's
simpler.
tough. It's tough the way the legislature wrote this, right? I mean, they're throwing all this in here to try to solve the housing problem with one bill.
Written by committee,
And it's
clearly by
being-
committee,
Right.
yeah.
Galen, just
Yep.
to clarify on your bucket page here, can you clarify the difference between the middle dwelling unit and the accessory dwelling unit. What's the difference?
So accessory apartments or accessory dwelling units don't follow your density. So you can put them on, as long as it's a single-family dwelling in town, you can have an accessory apartment or accessory dwelling unit. You don't need to match the density, there's no requirement for any of that provision. The 2 to 4 units require you to comply with the town's density requirements.
Okay,
And the ADUs also do not come under our growth,
Correct, they don't get a growth
Right.
permit. Yep, they can
and
just,
they
Right.
can just pop up.
yep.
Is it fair to think of them like we always thought about as the grandparents' apartment or the,
Yeah.
you know, they're,
In-laws
they're kind of, they're
apartments, yeah.
always gonna be owned by the primary homeowner.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
gonna have a, yeah, right.
But it really, in my opinion, it's one of the best, it's the best out of the three because it's a go-do. It helps our residents. It really addresses long-term rentals, which is a need. And so I think it's the cleanest, easiest, which is maybe why Warner put that one in.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're able to hold it in our heads and make sense of
Right.
it,
Yeah.
where the others, I think, we're
But
still
I
wrestling
am
with.
tripping up over we're not gonna do the 2 to 4 now, but I am getting tripped up with what Ed said. And I was just trying to, think through your response, Galen, and I understand where you're coming from, because the ADUs don't go towards that growth permitting, so you can say, okay, I'm gonna go, I've got the ability to do 2-4-1, or 4-4, whatever, depending on what area I am. And then to Ed's point, well, that's almost like a development that exists today, and they would be allowed to do ADUs. So I think when we get to the 2 to 4, we should just think that one through,
Yeah,
because it does
Yeah.
give that rental benefit. I don't want to overpopulate by any means, but then I think we just need to think through, is there a time limit for it? Is there a point in time where you would allow them to do ADUs? It's sort of weird.
well, what you
I
just,
think what's really tripping it up is they're all on one parcel. They're not like it's a nice, clean, single family on one little parcel, and then they decide, oh, I want to have an ADU attached to it, right? Instead, if we use Ed's example, there's 6 of them on one parcel. And then down the line in the future, okay, now all these 6 want to have ADUs. Property gets sold back and forth, like it can get quite, oh, yeah, are they 2 dwellings, or are they?
So
Like,
are
so it gets
are the 6
more convoluted.
separate deeds, 6 separate deeds and tax?
no. They're one lot. The law talks about one lot. It's got one deed. Once you start trying to make it multiple lots, then you gotta subdivide.
But
And the
that's
law,
what we're,
the law says, oh, no, this doesn't get you out of any of the legalities with doing subdivision.
Right.
We don't mean that.
No.
okay,
it
so I
does
think
not, but it
we'll
has-
stay away from 2 to 4 then, okay? 'cause
That's
that-
what,
So-
it's
Yeah,
kinda
it's gonna get,
convoluted
it's
and-
gonna
But-
get crazy.
But I bought, Galen,
right.
I bought your argument
Yeah.
with the affordable housing development.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I don't think those are gonna be single-family homes, but if they
No.
were even,
I don't think it will.
I think ADUs are different from that. So never the twain shall meet, and we ought to be clear about that. We don't think you can go build affordable housing and then add ADUs on them. Let's be clear. I'd like to talk some more about the multiple unit density bonus one that we're gonna talk about later with respect to ADUs, because I still think there's an argument to be made. First of all, I'm not quite clear who's gonna use that, but if they do, and they happen to be single-family homes, what do we care? But
Yeah.
that's all. Save that argument.
The next question was, if I have a duplex or multiplex, also known as an apartment or multifamily, can I add an accessory apartment to lot? And state law requires that accessory apartments are for single-family dwellings, and we've already updated our LD 2003. I know that might be a common question that you might get raised. So if you have a duplex or a multiplex in town, you can't add an ADU to it or accessory.
Because we say so.
Right.
Right. The
And the
law
state-
doesn't require us to, and we don't think it's a good idea.
State law doesn't require it, just says single family. Yep.
But we don't think it's a good idea
Yep.
either. It's already a duplex, let's not muddy the waters by,
Yep.
Right.
I just put that in there because I know that's probably going to be a common question you might hear from some people. Next question is if I want to add an accessory apartment to a single-family dwelling, what will my requirements be for water and sewer? This came up at the Board of Selectmen meeting, and I wanted to address that. So there is state wastewater requirements reviewed by the code enforcement officer when reviewing the building permit application for an accessory apartment. And the question was, well, what if I want to put an accessory apartment in and it doesn't meet capacity? You would either have to upgrade your existing septic tank, because that was what was, brought up as a what if, or you would have to create a separate septic tank for that just individual accessory apartment. And so I gave you the reference to what the flow rates are for septic tanks if you were just interested in what those requirements are, and it's based off the bedrooms.
Yep.
So I want to make that abundantly clear as well. Any questions on that section at all?
No, I think that's
No.
good
that
information.
makes perfect sense.
So with affordable housing development plan for private home ownership, what safeguards are in place? This came up, because we talked about rental side. There's a lot of deed covenants and restrictions that are put in place. But we were a little bit more fuzzy on what would happen in private ownership. I did reach out to Maine Housing. They gave these specific guidelines on how it works for when they have a full disclaimer, Maine Housing home buyer program. This is their parameters that they use for affordable private home ownership. And so they explained it doesn't exceed 85% of the purchase price is limited by the applicable Maine Housing's first-time homebuyer or successor program. So it's not one of those where the development happens, this is the concern that a lot of people have. A developer comes in that does affordable housing, the first person buys it, and then what happens second generation? They stay for 5 years and they decide to leave. So there are safeguards in place to protect the affordability aspect for private home ownership.
Can I ask a question about that?
For the
Definitely,
30
it's only
years.
for about 30 years.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's a deed restriction.
The law deals with this right up front. They say there needs to be, the municipality has to be happy with the mechanism that will, for 30 years, say that any turnover in this property still has to meet the affordability guidelines. 51% of the homes need to be afforded by people who are within range of the what do they call it, the AMI, the area median income. One such mechanism, Maine Housing does it, but I think it puts the burden on the town for having a mechanism in place, and it wasn't clear to me who in our town is gonna own that problem.
So that came up in the Town of Gray discussion. We asked what mechanism they utilize, and there is a deed restriction that is put on the deed. That's, and again, I told them from an enforcement perspective, it's not fair that the town has to be the one to be this type of monitoring it for decades on decades to make sure this is something.
3 decades
Yeah.
to be specific.
So at least 3 decades. So they heard that abundantly clear. That this isn't the first time they've had feedback from local governments, and so the state is well aware of this, and they're trying to figure out some way for rulemaking to help with this conundrum. But till then, it's the burden of the town, and certainly we would require some kind of deed restriction to be put in place to keep that, and we wouldn't release our interest until, if they do decide to change hands or anything, till that date was agreeable to. But yeah, it goes down to the code enforcement officer. The local municipality has to be the one to enforce it, unfortunately, as of right now. But good question.
No extra charge,
Yeah, no extra. Yeah.
no extra money.
The next one, a lot of folks were asking at the Board of Selectmen meeting, they were increased about the density of affordable housing development as it relates to stormwater runoff. Given the recent storms and flooding that occur, what can be done? And so I shared a little bit about an excerpt of what is in your local zoning. We do have, lot coverage requirements that have to be met. And then, of course, if it triggers subdivision, there are, safeguards in place that the planning board is going to be reviewing any future development plans to make sure that it's not going to have a negative impact on surrounding properties or the environment.
Can I comment on that, please?
Yep.
Any multiplex, as long as the affordable housing uses multiplexes, that is dwellings that are 3 units or more, it will go to the planning board. If there's a way to get around that, if they're using detached two families, for example, or some such thing, then I don't see how that's gonna come to the planning board, under the
No,
current
yeah, it has to trigger
guidelines.
it has to trigger a subdivision, right?
It's not a subdivision, though. We're not gonna subdivide the lot. It's gonna be one lot. It's gonna be owned by a single owner.
If you look at the state law for subdivision, structures do count. Separate dwelling units do count as a trigger of subdivision. And I can go over that with you,
Ah, that's a new one on me.
yeah. A
You're-
lot of
you're-
towns, they wanted to get rid of it, they want the state to clarify that, but it is
So,
a
so
3 or
right
more
now,
units.
you're saying if a owner puts a second structure on his lot, it is,
It's third, if it's the 3, yeah.
I thought you had to subdivide the lot to trigger a subdivision.
Nope.
Okay,
And we can go over that then, because that,
thank
it
you.
is, it is,
That's brand new
yeah.
to me.
yep.
Okay.
So this one is the one that I keep tripping up over, and Paul in his writings had referenced my question at the Board of Select after the review, the last meeting. So for this one, I still miss the process in our town. And Ed, I don't want to pick on the planning board by any means, but you guys can only work within somebody that comes to you and you're looking at
Yeah.
the runoff. So I've been reading through the
Absolutely.
language for this that everybody's been implementing and putting in, and it still feels like, every time I read it, that we don't really have a good process, and we're still putting the burden on, and I think Paul spoke to this too, we're still putting the burden on an after fact to the person that is in an adjacent lot that could be harmed by this. So first, we're putting the burden on the planning board to know, this impact. And then if it's not done correctly, the burden falls on the adjacent lot owner. And I think Paul came back, and so when I was reading through it today, I still can't, so there's two parts of it. There's that one part of it where I don't understand the trigger point within our processes that says, hey,
Right.
I got this, I'm gonna run it to ground, I own this.
ADUs don't come to the planning board.
Right,
Just start there. right?
yeah, so I'm going down the affordable housing one.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just stay on the affordable housing, because the ADUs don't come in. But we do have language for the ADUs, which is sort of funny now, because you said they don't come in. So how are we gonna monitor that?
It's code office.
So I think that, so there's that part of it, and then I still go back. So this is where I'm at, I still can't get beyond this point. The point is, the growth plan was developed for a purpose of identifying areas that were 1,000 feet or more close to sewer that we would call growth, which the group did, published, great. Then the state comes in and says, well, now you started to build a fire engine, but it's going to actually be a ship. So we don't need you to change anything, but you got to call it a ship now. And that's where I get caught up, because the state's coming in and saying, okay, you guys call this a growth area, but now this is what growth area is going to mean. And we're going to go in and we can do 2.5 times affordable housing in this growth area, and we can come in for 4 to 1 for the density side, which we're not going to talk about today or yet, that we haven't gone in deep yet. And so my problem is, and I keep going back, where we do have the 20%, and I appreciate that feedback, but that's not solving our problem for runoff. So I really, if you said, what do you really want, Mary Beth? I really would like this committee to hit the brakes and say, okay, ADUs, see you later. Go say yes, board, to your town meetings, let's get it done. Let's help people with the ADU part and make sure they know that they can go do it. But then I would like this committee to say, okay, whoa, let's hold up a minute. Let's reopen up this growth map, and let's make sure that these are true growth areas. And there are areas on the growth map that have water issues, not because their houses are covering more than 20%. It's because of where they are, how the water runs off, and we really can't add more. So I would actually like the committee to sit down with Chris and Eric and say, okay, what should this growth map look like? Because I just feel, I keep going through this from a system approach. Who's accountable? And if we just do the language and pass this through, somebody thinks that somebody went through and redid this and looked at it. And so that's where I would have trouble putting my name on it, because I'm now understanding that growth area was defined differently or under a different purview than what it's going to be used for. And I'd really like the town to go back and do that before we march ahead with.
So can I comment on that, please? I think that's a solid point, and it comes off of, I was looking at it in the smaller sense. I was looking at, wait a minute, if we think it's important enough to put this qualification on ADUs, that a drainage plan is needed on ADUs, how can we be modifying our land use ordinance just for ADUs if we're not going to require a drainage plan for anything that requires an excavation or a modification or a change in the drainage profile of the lot, right? We can go build a single-family home today on a new lot, and there's nothing in the land use ordinance that says it requires a drainage plan,
Right. And
right?
right.
So we're trying to fix that, we're trying to put a patch on it by saying, well, wait a minute, for ADUs, we're gonna. Well, some of the ADUs are inside the existing home, so obviously they don't need a drainage plan.
Yep.
But if we think that's a problem, I just showed Galen, I went and just Googled today, Westbrook has got a form in there that anything that requires an excavation, any building in the town that requires an excavation or a modification of the external profile of the house or a regrading of the lot requires a drainage plan. That's how I read that.
Yeah.
Check the boxes. What are the criteria? One of them is ADU. Another one is new garage. Another one is a single-family home. It's the same issue.
Yeah, and I think that's actually where we would want to, I have great concern. I keep bringing it up. I think, if I can't get you guys to bite, then I'm going to maybe make a motion at the board meeting, because I believe in this to my gut. I don't function this way. I can't go through and create what I perceive as known issues.
Yeah.
I can't exasperate them. And so I'm just saying, we are accountable to make sure the town does it right. There's nobody else working on this. So it's like, okay, let's get this right. And so so we right now, and Paul brought this up at one of our first meetings, in the area that I'm down at Goose Rocks Beach, there was a development that went in behind us. Every 5 years, they can put a house up. When they did the land blasting and moved granite, and
Yeah.
moved all the granite out, clear cut, which they're out of shoreland, but they're close to shoreland. And we just got flooded because we sit downhill. And so our whole neighborhood, houses, flood.
It's like California in the
Yeah.
mudslides, right?
And so that's where it becomes really hard to say, okay, if we do have this thing that we know that we haven't fixed yet, let's fix it. But then can we go back and look at the growth areas and tag off those and make them transitional so that they don't fall into this growth bucket? Because now we know what growth means at a statewide level, which this group did not know when they first put the plan together.
Well, let me say
I
that.
guess I would argue, and maybe I'm gonna put this in different perspective. Right now in the town, if you're in the village residential area where it's 20,000 square feet for a lot, you can have a lot coverage of 20%, which is 4,000 square feet. Nothing right now is stopping any of us from buying a parcel in that area and putting 4,000 square feet of impervious surface
Right,
for a single-family dwelling.
Right.
yeah.
I agree that we need to address this because it's not going to trigger subdivision. It's not going to be under the review.
Yeah, and that's where Ed just brought that up. I
But
think that's a good,
We're saying the same thing.
I think we're getting the affordable housing density blurred in there because I don't think we should stop the brakes. I think maybe we need to look at the criteria to add that language in there that's not being triggered for municipal review for stormwater.
Why not add that in
Right.
across the board? Why limit it to just for ADUs?
No,
If we're going to make a
yeah.
change to the land use
Just add it
ordinance and
now.
go to the
Yeah,
expense and
just-
trouble of putting
Just
it
add that now, but I still.
because we just had this major weather
Yep.
event.
So
Everyone in the
that's one
town
of
is
two.
sensitized
The
to
second
it.
thing is there are areas in the growth plan, in the growth map, growth area, on the growth map, on the map.
Yeah.
Which have water issues, not runoff issues. It's not shoreland
Water
water
supply
issues.
issues.
No.
No.
Water runoff.
Okay,
So
drainage issues.
specifically, when after the storm, we went up behind the colony, in that area up there, the chief was showing us where one of the fire hydrants, which is about 2.5 feet off the ground, was covered with water. And Chris showed us where the town had just done work on the sides of the road, and it was all washed out. So that we have known areas that
so
you really don't want to increase density.
Stormwater issues.
Stormwater.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that's something, and so again, that's what
So I think
I'd like to hear from you guys.
Galen just put his finger on it, though. Why not put language in there that says any new construction that you do that requires a change to the grading of the lot triggers somebody going to the code enforcement office with a drainage plan?
But what I'm saying is that, so I think that's, yes, I think that should happen, like Galen just said, that's a go-do ad, and it covers the base of everything. The issue I'm bringing up is that we have known areas in town
Yeah.
that there are no answers to. There are no answers to how to
Right.
counter the water runoff in specific areas that are currently in the growth plan. So you do not want to add more houses or density
I'm with you.
to that area.
But we just,
Right.
that
Can I
solution that
speak for a
says,
minute? It's tough. It's tough doing this remotely because
it's a,
you can't see any, you guys aren't looking at me, which is fine. So that's my issue. But I got a couple comments. I mean, the two things we're talking about here are affordable housing density bonus, which is going to trigger subdivision review. Is that correct? Galen?
That's
your
what,
thoughts?
that's what I believe, Mary, you were saying about the density bonus, right? That's the concern?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the affordable housing density bonus. She was concerned with the impact.
Right.
Or,
that
yeah,
the
and
increased
then,
density would have.
right, and
But
the 2 to
that-
4 in the future.
Yeah, the 2 to 4, let's keep that off the table tonight because we're not gonna, the goal tonight is to try to get through these two and then maybe the committee can say, yes, we believe this is consistent with the comprehensive plan and everybody will be happy. Or maybe not. But if we take the 2 and 4 and keep that off the table for this discussion, if we're looking at affordable housing density bonus, that's all about a subdivision in the growth area. Do I have that correct?
In theory, yeah, that, I mean, they're not gonna take advantage of the bonus and only do 2 units. That's just.
Two units, right?
Right.
So
right.
that's
take
gonna,
advantage of it.
99% of a chance that's gonna go through subdivision and they will have an opportunity to deal with water runoff
Correct.
within the current regulations,
Fair point.
right?
Yep.
No matter where it's built in the growth area today, even in the absolute worst place that you're thinking of there, that. The second one is the accessory dwelling unit, which we put a Band-Aid in last time to address potential runoff issues. So that's going to require a drainage plan. So I think both of these two buckets can move forward with the existing, with our other existing land use ordinances, and they will help us to protect us against the potential for water runoff issues. I agree with you on the growth plan and that overlay. We should look at that. We have some better knowledge now of where there are areas. Whether or not we have to change it, or are there other engineering controls that could be put in place that would actually make it too expensive for someone to actually manage the water? But if and the second piece is we do need to have an ordinance that deals with drainage across the board. That covers, as Ed was mentioning, covers everything. If you're putting a shovel in the ground, or you're changing the configuration of your land, or you're adding structures, you got to put in a drainage plan. And that would have to be approved. So we do need that ordinance. This committee could help initiate that ordinance to get it written and reviewed.
So
And I think that we want that in place
I gotta believe
along with the review of the growth
that can
as
be
part
done.
of the 2 to 4.
Right, but I think
Don't wanna
I
wait on that.
still, so if I heard you correct, Dan, during this time too, before we go even for this vote, we would work with Chris and Eric to see if there's some place on the current growth plan that we should block off, because I don't think you can let the horses out of the barn for the ADU and affordable housing, and then when the 2 to 4 come up, try to change your growth and say, oh, no, just kidding, this isn't growth area, this is the growth area now.
The horses are already out of the barn with ADUs. ADUs are
Yes.
allowed.
No, I'm
By our current-
talking about things that specifically are looking at differences for growth area. So growth area defines you as being able to go and do 2.5 times density. On the 2 to 4 units, the growth area allows you to go not to 2, but to 4. So there are differences, and we have to be very cognizant
Okay.
of the growth area. What does growth mean? Growth means high density.
Right?
And that's where I keep having trouble with. So I really would like the growth map before we go back to the board, before we go to the town hall. My request is continuing to be the same thing, to go back to that growth map, talk with Chris and Eric, look if there's some areas that for whatever reasons that we shouldn't have in the growth area, and then put that forward when we put the ADUs in. If we have to make a change, then put that forward.
But wouldn't it be equivalent, without tackling it that way, if you put an ordinance in place across the board that says wherever you're doing construction, for whatever reason, if you're changing, if you're excavating, if you're changing the profile of a house, if you're putting up a new structure, you need to consider drainage. You need to have a drainage plan. Here's what it comprises. You need to do that. That would be in place for anything in any area, regardless of what it says in the current growth area.
Yes, and I would agree
Yes.
with that, but we do have a difference in terms of known issues that have no solutions in the town right now.
Well,
And they're in the growth
that's the-
area, and I don't
that's
really
the-
think they should be.
Yeah, Mary Beth, that's the part where I can disagree respectfully. You could pretty much engineer anything to take care of a drainage problem, right? It's just how much money you
It
want to
just
spend
might be
on it.
prohibitively expensive,
Yeah,
and
we could make
that's
a
okay.
prohibitive, I mean, I could put in a big well and a pump and pump it all the way to the ocean and then get all the approvals I need to do so. And spend, $10 million to
I just
develop
think,
my land and just make it, prohibitive.
well, you're putting your finger on why I'm concerned with the Band-Aid, with putting it only on ADUs, because I worry that it is sending a signal that Kennebunkport is going along with the new law. We're putting in ADUs, but we are requiring for ADUs something we don't require for any other structure or any other excavation.
Yeah.
We're gonna require a drainage plan. Well,
So,
wait a
I
minute.
agree with you, but the charge we were given was to try to get these things through for July.
No, I understand, but let's,
Right, so-
I think you can do that by just putting that plan requirement in place across the board.
So I
That's a
don't-
whole
I-
nother ordinance.
Yeah.
Putting it in put it in section 6 of the land use ordinance would be my thought. And you don't have to get into the specifics of, needs to be done by a professional engineer or anything like that. It just needs to be addressed.
They have manuals out now for
Oh.
low-impact development that you can follow. And it has even little suggestions in here of not even going into the weeds of huge
We're
hydrological
blessed.
studies and everything
And,
else.
and you've inherited a very,
Yeah.
a very good code enforcement office.
Yep.
They're a professional group, and they have the wherewithal to look at something and say, look, this is a very straightforward situation, and it doesn't require anything extraordinary, or just the opposite. Oh, this is really hairy. Look at this. We're gonna require more. I, for one, don't have any problem with giving them that discretion.
Why wouldn't we do this?
I don't know.
Dan, is that something we can, or
I
need
think we
to
ask for help.
vote on adding to the,
Oh, we have to come up with an ordinance.
yeah,
Someone's got to draft an ordinance, right? No, absolutely, you can do it. It won't be done before July. I mean, we're supposed to be done with this now, with these.
So I
But I
really,
take, but
yeah.
Mary Beth, we take
I-
our charge, we take
yeah.
our direction from yourself and the planning board. If you don't want to push these through, I'm happy with that as well.
yeah, no,
These-
I think,
these aren't our ordinances.
I'll go back, and we have the meeting this Thursday, and I'll speak again at the board meeting, like I did last time, and give the board my thoughts. I appreciate the work and the discussion right now. I think it's extremely healthy discussion, and there's a lot of good knowledge being shared. But again, I keep going back to, I'm not going to rush to a date for any reason, because I'm not going to put my name on a rush to a date for any reason. We need to answer questions. We need to think through this. And I know other towns are doing the exact same thing. A lot of people are really trying to think through this to make sure. We are going to change the look and feel of our town. We're going to change a lot of the operation of our town. So we should be, and we are the people charged with that, or this committee is the ones that are doing the due diligence. So I just want to make sure that it's not just thinking about the language and the impact of the language, but we're doing the thought process, because there is nobody else I can find in the town that's doing that thought process.
Right.
So I think that's my final comment on that.
Happy to do that.
I'd sort of like to make a comment, and it's sort of backing up a little bit more and trying to figure out what the objective of LD 2003 is. And I think that the idea is that we can build out areas closer to our town so that it is walkable and, so people can get into town to do their business. But we have a different kind of town. We don't have a grocery store in town that people will walk to get their groceries. We no longer have a pharmacy in town for people to go to. The post office is in town, but it just seems like we're doing all of this because we're being told to do it, but there's no real, it doesn't make sense from why would people come here to access a downtown that's really designed for the tourists who come here. It's not designed for the residents. I have trouble kind of making sense of that.
You're absolutely right, Jay. It's the state legislature felt this was something they needed to tackle. I've also seen recently they're pushing through another bill to give them the final authority, so that if a developer tries to come in and build an affordable housing applying the density bonus, and we have barriers in the way that they feel are barriers, that the state can override and say, thou shalt do it. I'm not sure what's driving that. I wish, our representative would come speak to us, because obviously we've been dealing with this topic for a while. We have it in our comp plan. It's a state approved comp plan. And these things have been on our docket, and we've also have attempted affordable housing within the town, right, through the housing trust. So it's a good question to ask. Really good question to ask.
Well, I think the other thing too of that, and I think Paul brought this up in one of his notes, of, what's really happening here too. So there's the side effects of increasing housing, increasing the ability to put more housing on a piece of property. You by default just increase the value of that property. So while we're talking out of one side, affordable housing, which, as Dan said, the town has given money to the Heritage Trust. We've delayed on taxes for the land from those developments. Townspeople have contributed, to the trust to build those houses. And so we've already, to Dan's point, we've been walking the walk of bringing affordability to the town. This law, it gets me confused, because when you start adding the density, we're actually now going to increase the property values. So who's going to be buying this property? I have a house on 10 acres. When I bought the house, it was a house on 10 acres. I could sell the house now, if this goes through, as a house that could have multiple houses on it. So my property value just went up dramatically, not for anything about the house, but specifically for this law. So it's an increase, but you can't stop the free market. And the free market is what housing prices will be garnered on the availability to build more. So we're sort of, all parts of this law are a little bit confounding, and that's why I always go back to the ADU as the simplistic, and it's probably the cleanest one for trying to achieve additional housing without impacting. It's going to actually increase that person's housing price, but they're actually investing in building an ADU. So that's,
I agree completely, 100%.
Yep.
I don't think we need to, I don't think we can rush this.
and the thing that the state, and so Dan, when I read the thing about, our representative putting forward now this new law, where the state would come in and have an oversight board and basically get rid of home rule, and come and oversee the municipalities to ensure the affordability of it. To me, when I read that, my mind went to the point of they're having trouble trying to make this law stick. And so now this is going to be an enforcement, but again, that's going to have to go through the houses and get passed. And we have an election year coming up, so I'm not sure how much they can get done by June, because some of these people's terms are up anyways. So, or some of these people will be,
Right.
up for reelection. So I just think that that's a signal that the state's having issues trying to enforce this, because people like us are struggling with what does it really mean.
Right. Hey,
Hello?
go ahead, Robin.
Hello. I just want to thank you all for being so thoughtful with the process, because this is complex, and I'm appreciative of the fact that you're, possibly slowing the roll in agreement. There's just one thing I want to bring up, and the public needs to understand this, that for these density bonuses, only 51% have to be affordable. So now you're opening, so 49% of a subdivision can be $2 million. So I think that worries me a little, in our town, because someone could see that, that's clever, and, go for that. And it's not really what this bill stands for, but when you see that is, that's worrisome to me, and I would like some public discussion so people do understand this isn't gonna be, for workforce housing like they want. It's going to be some of that, and then there's going to be half of it that is just a whole bunch more people having an impact on our town. And I would like that just considered, and thank you for your time, because I know this is complex.
Thank you, Robin. That's a very good point, and one I think the board is trying to take into account as well, especially with, well, like you just mentioned with the affordable housing bonus, the other 49%, what are those homes? But also the up to 4 dwelling units and how that'll be managed. I mean, does the one lot now become, 4 $2 million condos? That's not really helping anything with the affordable housing. So
Galen,
thank you for bringing that up.
Galen, do we know, from what's happened so far in the state, where does a developer need to get to in terms of number of units to make it affordable for them to buy land, have 51% of the properties be in the affordability bucket, and then, as Robin said, 49%? Are we talking, they have to go in and do 100 units, 300 units, 150, does anybody has somebody been successful with this, outside of like our Heritage Trust, which is more, they've been given, the town has granted stuff, so they've gotten a leg up.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mary Beth. I would say that it is depending on the project and the location of where you are in the state. Land obviously is a lot more expensive here than other parts. But in some places, it's the material cost, building material cost, and the labor in certain other areas. So it's all dependent on the project. What I will share with you is Maine Housing, before they even grant funds, do a subsidy for a project, they have to run the numbers over a 30-year period to see if this is going to be kept in an affordability range for what rents are forecasted to be. For the affordability aspect of it. So I know that those numbers are being done. I just don't know what the actual, hey, it's 12 units or this to make it, yeah.
Yeah, because that goes back to that whole thing where it's almost like the 2 to 4 unit is in, the unforeseen consequence of the 2 to 4 unit increasing land value actually works against the affordable aspect piece of it, because now a developer in the free market is going to have to pay more, for that property.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, it's like we're,
And the other thing is, life safety code wise, after 3 units, you have to deal with fire suppression systems. So that's another added cost that you have to add into the development. So it's,
So you're making a good point that says that it makes the land more valuable, but I thought we just talked about there being a deed restriction in there that for 30 years it can't be more.
no,
It
no,
can't,
so
it can't
we
be sold
have,
for more, so.
no, so let's take, let's just take, we have, let's make some stuff up. In the growth area, we've got 20 acres.
Let's say.
Okay, let's say. And it's pretty, it's nice,
Sure.
easy to get to.
Yep.
Um,
Can run a bus,
and-
run shuttle buses.
Yep, and it's
Yep.
in the growth area.
Put a grocery store in.
So for the, we're not going to go deep in it right now, but we're just going to surface it over. In the growth area, it can have a 4-to-1, it can have 4 units per, like it was 1 unit. So say it's 1 lot, it's 10 acres, 1 lot.
So we're not
So-
doing affordable housing here.
No,
You're doing
no,
the
No, I'm just saying
multiplier.
if the 2 to 4 if the 2
Four-
to 4,
four
which is part
times
of
the
this lot.
density.
Yep.
Yep.
And so we go to that 10-acre lot and,
20 acre.
well, I went back down to 10.
All right, Route 10.
And so it's 1 lot, and usually you just put 1 house there, and now it's viewed as, because it's in the growth areas, because I've got the zoning area, I can put 4 or 6 or whatever it is per that zone. So let's just say it's 40,000, it's, yeah. Then whatever it turns out to be, I can have multiple houses now. So that 10 acres that was 1 lot that could have had 1 house and sold that way can now be sold at a much higher price because the density per that lot can go up significantly. So a developer coming in there can say, okay, I'm going to run my numbers, I can get X amount of houses from here, the land value is going to go up.
Can we tease that apart for just a second? Because the 10 acres today in village residential, and I'm saying this is all flat and buildable, and we're not worried about wetlands or anything else, but just for a thought experiment, I can put 10 single-family homes on it today,
Right.
right? Roughly, maybe 9, but just keep the math simple. I could do that. I could subdivide it and sell 10 homes on a 10-acre lot today under the current densities.
Right.
That density, we're not changing it.
But you can't do you can only do it granted every 5 years, right?
No, you do a subdivision, do a subdivision, and I put 10 homes on there.
Okay.
I'm not changing, no one's proposing to change in the land use ordinance the 40,000 square foot per single-family home. You can put 4 houses on a lot, but you can't beat that 40,000 square foot minimum requirement per dwelling unit. So you can't put more than 10 on them, even if we put this new law into effect.
Right.
We just can't require that, we have to keep the playing field level. We can't say, oh, the first one I'm gonna require 40,000, but I'm gonna, put a more severe restriction on the next ones. As long as you just say the number is 40,000 square foot per dwelling unit, or 20,000, or
Right.
whatever it is.
Okay, so let's
You
take.
can't squeeze more houses in there under this law.
Let's take a house that's on 10 acres right
Yes,
now. So house on 10 acres.
Right.
I'd have to go in and subdivide, and I could do a subdivision, I could do another house every 5 years on that piece of property.
no, if you are a homeowner and you don't want to go to the planning board,
Yeah,
you
so
just want
I'm a
to,
homeowner.
then
I'm
you
a
can do
home-
it every, yeah,
Yeah, so I'm a homeowner, I have a house on 10 acres.
yep.
And if I sold that house today in the market, a person can look at that, a developer or a person could look at that and say, oh, okay, I could value that property as putting a house, because it's 3-acre requirements in rural, I can put a house on every 5 years, and that's my math for.
No, you can plan and build a subdivision, and the 5 years is what you're restricted to if you don't want to trigger a subdivision
Yes,
review.
so I'm there.
Oh, okay, all
I'm
right.
on that path.
All
I
right,
didn't go down subdivision.
okay.
I'm just a lonely buyer. I'm just a lonely person living on 10 acres.
I feel
And
for you.
I found another person that wants
Yeah.
to be, that likes that idea, doesn't want to go to the planning board. No
Yeah.
offense on you guys,
No,
but
no.
doesn't want to go to the planning board. and says,
granddaughter,
Okay,
whatever, yeah.
I can go and I can do one house, so I'm going to value that property because I can go build additional house every 5 years. And that's going to be how that
Oh.
person values that piece of property in the free market. Now, when this comes through, you know, they're actually going to be allowed to trigger without going to subdivision?
I know you would still
No.
trigger subdivision.
Okay,
There's no
still
change
trigger
in
If they do the
subdivision.
3 lots in
No,
5 years, they would
Okay.
still, they'd
Okay.
still have to go.
Okay,
No change in
Yeah.
that.
okay, got it. See, these are good discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It
then,
is, but
I'm glad
again,
we have
it's
a planning
it's
board member
I
here
know.
because it helps.
the three buckets
Yeah.
being separate.
But
Again,
why
it's
don't we
coming
let
back
them
to
sit at
bite
the
it. We start
table?
talking
I
about
don't
affordability, but no, I don't put aside affordability, we're just talking about the multiple dwellings, and there's some overlap, but we get them conflated in our minds. I do, anyway.
right.
But the
And they could,
affordable
if you had
housing,
that 10 acres, you
But
could
the-
also do a cluster development and
Yeah.
actually put 11 homes on it.
Right. That's mostly what we see.
but the
That's right.
affordable housing part is where that's what's going to trigger the market value of
And
the
that
land to go up.
Cluster
because it's-
development's important because the reality is we do have ledge and we do have wetlands,
Yep.
and
You have
that's
to-
what's left.
You have to decrease that. You can't count that as part of your,
No, but I know, but the 2.5 times, you know, whatever, that's that
back to
multiplier, that
affordable
2.5
again.
times is, I've gone back to affordable, because we ran the other one to ground.
Oh, I don't think
So
we did,
now
but yeah, okay.
so we're done with that.
We'll
My
be
brain's
back.
happy there.
we're going back.
But now we got to go to affordable. So affordable, a piece of land, a developer's got to look at that, and that's going to be the equation, is I can take half of that, the 49, I can take 1%, I can take 49% of the buildable area, and I can do 2.5 times density, as long as I do, for the 51%, 2.5 times density and an affordable rate. So to Robin's point, I can have a, what's it called, dichotomy? Is that it? No. I can have
Paradox?
two opposite ends.
A paradox. You said.
But good, one, but no. Within that development, I can have extremely high ends, because I am going to rake this land over the coals and extract as much money as I can, because my 51% has to be affordable. So I'm going to be,
As long as the free market. will-
yeah, but that's free
yeah.
market, that's how the developer's going to
Right.
win here, right? So
Sure.
we're actually going to, if you think it through, play that one down. If you play that one to the end, you are getting rid of middle-class-ish housing, because you've gone to super rich and you've gone to affordability of housing. So these are really
Bring that
weird.
back,
These
bring that
been
back to Kennebunkport, though,
circumstances.
Mary
Yeah.
Beth. Bring that to Kennebunkport. Let's try to do a specific one. You think that, does this have to be the growth area again? I forget. No, this is growth area, right?
Growth area,
Growth area.
except for residential, village
so-
residential E, which meets the requirements.
So that's fine, it's where multiplexes are allowed. So we're saying in those 5 zones, you're gonna find a lot, and you're gonna say, instead of putting X number of, instead of putting a multiplex in there that's got N units, we're gonna put 2.5 N, 2.5 N units in it. They're probably going to be one or more dwellings that are going to be condos, wouldn't you think? They're not going to be single-family homes, right?
Right.
You can get too much money for a single-family home already. And so maybe you got 3 multiplexes there that each have 3 units in it, or 5 units in it. We're not talking about, something that's gonna. I'm sorry, I thought I heard an interrupt, but in those 5 zones, go look at what free land there is available there. We're saying, okay, like, for example, down in the village parcel. Is that in village residential, some of it? Is that it?
Enterprise and village residential.
So in the village residential, you could put a multiplex in there, that would be a target for one of these things. And you could put some units 51% of them, so if you had 6 units, you'd have to have 4 of them that would be affordable and 2 of them not, right? That's why it's 51%, so that you can't, do it evenly. So 2 would cost more than the other 4 in close proximity to each other. That's all we're talking about. I
But
don't think it's a big,
So that's why I asked Galen the numbers, because when you, the other way of thinking it through from a developer standpoint, so in this area, we have the worst of everything that Galen spoke about. We've got high land price, we've got high cost of labor, and we've got, and lack of building labor, and we also have extremely high cost of materials.
and one of the highest AMIs, though, in the state also,
Yeah,
for a fact.
so I think that, so it's just interesting because it just really goes back to running the numbers about how big of an area this is gonna have to be for a developer. It's not gonna be 6 houses, it's gonna be in the hundreds for them to make.
How likely is it to actually happen here at the current numbers? I'm in the process, my family home, my dad died last year, and so we're emptying out a 2-family home in Arlington, Massachusetts. And talking to the realtor this last weekend, I asked him, I said, so is there any density bonus available at some point that we should know about, that maybe a potential buyer would be interested? And he says, as a matter of fact, there is. The MBTA, the public transportation, has an overlay zone, and you're in it. He says, but there isn't enough land there. He would have to acquire another one. I said, well, what percentage of the units would have to be affordable? Arlington's one of 6 communities in Massachusetts that has the density bonus, although the governor's talking about doing it across the state. 15%, not 51%, 15% of the units need to be affordable for them to claim the bonus. We're at 51%. I just question, it's not that big a club. Is it really going to help the developers that much? I don't know. Is it going to be persuasive that developers will clamor to do that, given what they can get for a single-family home already?
And with the high cost of land as well, I think that's a
Yeah,
huge barrier in Kennebunkport. That's just,
it's going to have to be,
in most communities, it's the building's actually worth more than the land. Here it's reversed.
yeah.
So I
We're-
think
we're
that's
in
a
an
huge
unusual
barrier, 'cause
situation.
they're gonna have to buy the land. They can't do much with building cost. I mean, that's set in stone off the market, and your labor is already high.
I keep going back to the
Land's gonna
village
be a
parcel,
barrier.
though. That,
Yeah, so that's why if
That's where the test case would
if
be.
the state did have anything, like if there was a group within the state that has run some numbers on this, with multiple variables.
Some
and
realism, yeah.
Just said high, for the 3 or whatever their variables are, we can just say, yeah, just rate us high across all 3.
that'd be a good question
What
for
is the-
DECD.
Yeah, I don't know if they have just some guidelines, because I'm pretty sure that question's gonna pop up when we get to the town.
Oh, I think you're right, absolutely.
Okay, Robin's got her hand up again. Can you,
Uh,
hey, hi,
Hello.
Robin.
Hi. I know what you mean, Mr. Francis, but 6 is different than 100, and the village parcel originally was for 87. That's without any density bonus, and I don't understand why I guess I understand the incentive, but I don't think that's going to do our town any favors when it comes to that, because if you can get a large subdivision approved like that, then that means, that's a lot of impact on our town, and getting a density bonus at the same time. When really it's only probably helping half the town or half the people that are, for the affordable housing. So I just see this as a way for private developers to just earn a lot of money, and realtors and everything else. And I think that we'll be at the expense of Kennebunkport, because we are unique and we have a lot of, like you said, ledge and wetlands, and a lot of land is conserved already. So I just am expressing that that part of the bill is bothersome, and I hope we take our time to put that to warrant so people really can understand what that may look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Okay.
Deep thought.
All right, so coming out of this, are we comfortable with giving any assessment of the ADU and the way it's been amended? As whether we feel it's consistent with the comprehensive plan?
So you're going in the packet, it's 240-7.1. So again, the subsection, with this section, with the accessory apartments, which is the ADUs, subsection E is the double dipping provision, and that's the staff suggested amendment, but again, that's, I know, a conversation that's been discussed. I don't know if you want to include that. If not, it's,
Can we start at B?
yep.
Because I'm not understanding why we would want to make any change to B. Why would we, what was the thought behind focusing on the height requirement?
That was.
I mean, all of the requirements, don't we want all the requirements in section 6 to be applicable to the ADU? They already are.
They just thought from a user-friendly perspective, it's easier to cross-reference that than,
But then say that, put section 6, don't call out the height requirement. Because it sort of implies that all of the other ones aren't applicable. Someone will infer that.
that was when Mr. Hogan explained at the last meeting about design requirements for detached or attached structures for accessory apartments, that they wanted to make sure it met the design requirements.
But that includes the setbacks and
Yep.
every other, the soil, every other aspect of it needs to be met, including the height. That's just one.
Yep.
I think this weakens. So that's my vote on that.
So
my
the
2 cents.
proposal is just to remove the height restriction?
To leave B intact as it is already in effect. I think it's already compliant with LD 2003, and the concern for meeting the design requirements is already met by the land use ordinance. In my opinion, you check with your code enforcement guys. I think they'll
It is.
confirm
Again,
that.
it was, again, I remember Paul was concerned about just, he wanted it to be reinstated that here's the section. When people are looking at it, they usually have blinders.
Yeah,
If they're doing that, then I suggest you give some thought to saying all the requirements for section 6 still have to be met, not the height requirement needs to be met. Just what's it saying
think
now
that-
by saying 6.2?
I think that's fair. Because that gets to Paul's intent, which is to keep it focused.
in front
But
of
it
it,
gets
yeah.
to Ed's point too, which is don't distract from the rest of the requirements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I don't have my hand up, sorry. All right, sorry.
Any other questions?
So so then what's the resultant of E that you were just talking about, Galen?
E's the
Yeah.
double dipping provision.
Yep,
So it says only one accessory apartment shall be permitted per single-family dwelling, but do you want it that's per lot as well? So it's only one accessory apartment per lot.
That's
what that
the
provision-
minimum that the
This is the
law
one that where if you
requires.
had 10 of them on one lot versus,
Right.
yeah,
Could each one have
yeah.
an accessory?
And again, my thought on that is why not? I don't think anyone's going to do it, but
I think they will. That's, 'Cause
Really?
it's avoiding the density requirements, yes.
Yeah, I think they
Yep.
will too.
I
With
think it's,
single-family homes
Yep.
I
on the
think,
Because
density?
think about it, you're multiplying from a free market perspective, you're multiplying based off the
So,
density.
so this is looking forward to the
2 to 4.
2 to 4
Yep.
2 to
Yep.
4.
and saying, yeah.
Yeah,
But once you subdivide them, then they're each gonna be individual lots, and then they can put an ADU on it after the fact.
Yeah,
yes,
they have to go through a
Right.
subdivision process, and that's quite more extensive than
yeah.
every 5 years to just constantly put one.
I think that's fair, the way it's written.
Okay,
I think it goes to the point and it doesn't disregard the subdivision in a later date or that point. And it helps us because, like we talked about before, they're not counted in the growth permit, so
Right.
it keeps it sort of not tapped down, but it keeps it controllable.
We're trying from a code perspective to require for the building permits when they come in for an accessory apartment that they specify it's an accessory apartment. But in the past, that wasn't the case. And so, was this a cottage? Was this a second dwelling? You know, it can get a little bit convoluted. So I think having this language in here just clarifies it for everyone moving forward that it's a single family, you're coming in for a building permit, you're getting an accessory apartment, one per lot, that's it. You want to create more, create a subdivision.
I
and
wonder
you
if there's any lots in town that have 2 single-family homes on them.
I have some fun cases that I can show you that are,
No, I'm not,
they were cottages.
oh,
and
yeah,
then-
sure, fair enough.
Yeah, so they're here.
So, okay, so that's good then,
Yep,
all right. So H is that whole thing about the drainage plan.
that's the drainage plan that was suggested at the last, by Mr. Hogan. That's his amendment.
And we talked about the fact that maybe we want to pursue putting that in as a broader requirement and not just for ADUs.
Again, I don't think I
That's
can get
correct.
that on the warrant because it wasn't introduced in time for the city, the town
Right.
clerk, but certainly I can look at that.
That could come in when we do
See
the
how
2
hard
to
it would be to
4.
do.
That could come in when you do the 2 to 4.
Right,
Right.
that would be in
Yeah.
November if that, yeah.
Yeah, the benefit of putting it here is, you know, this already exists and everyone can already do a ADU.
So
So
no, I understand that.
amending it will at least require anyone doing a new one to have to do a drainage plan instead of waiting, you know,
Right.
till November
Right.
maybe, be the next time.
And I think
address it.
if we have something in motion to be doing this in the broader sense, I think it will be a defense against the argument that says, wait a minute, you shouldn't be requiring people to do more just because it's going to be intended to be affordable. It's going to, right.
Right. No, I hear what you're saying. You're right. We don't want to make it a barrier just to affordability.
Right.
No, you're
That's-
right.
That's
You're
the
right.
last thing we want
That's
to
a
do.
good point.
So the language then under H, I think needs to be looked at. Let me just read maybe if I read it to you, I'll read it better than it reads in my mind. The plan must demonstrate that the proposed improvements are designed to minimize and location of improvements to minimize the total area of impervious surface on the, it's not a sentence. What's going on? Right? Did my printer screw up or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, this was the language that, yeah, Paul gave. I didn't
The impervious surface on the
minimize.
site and
What's the first
stormwater
sentence mean?
management.
Even.
I think he repeated himself and left out.
The
It's
plan must
minimizing the
demonstrate.
impervious
our
surface
dis-
on the site.
Anyway, I think this needs some editing. Let me,
Right.
let me just say that. it's hard to critique it. It didn't, I couldn't even read it. Can we just take an action to review it? And if, maybe,
Well, I
if
guess
somebody wants
I need
to make a
clarification
cut at
from the
that.
committee. Do you want me to remove this section out of the language that's going in front of the Board of Selectmen? That's what I need direction first.
No,
No? Leave it in?
I don't.
Well, what's it meant to say? Is it just a
We
type?
could amend it, but I think we have to leave in something about water.
You
the
want to put
drainage.
something in about a drainage plan. Can I suggest that it be
Oh, I think he
as
just-
terse as possible?
I think he just put in a phrase, the part that says, and location of improvements to minimize. I think you can remove that and it makes sense.
I don't know what even the word improvements means there.
Well, I think leave that.
Yeah,
all
I
out.
think you're right. So the plan must demonstrate that the proposed improvements are designed to minimize the total area of impervious surface on the site. So if you just take out and location of improvements to minimize.
Yep.
What are improvements?
Well, we're going to take that out. If we take that out.
The word improvements, you just read
Take
again.
out
Minimize.
and
It's-
location of improvements to minimize.
So
No.
here's the sentence.
The
it must-
first improvements.
So the
where's that?
sentence is, the plan must demonstrate that the proposed improvements are designed to minimize the amount of stormwater leaving the site. This must include consideration of the design and location of improvements to minimize the total area of impervious surface on the site and stormwater management techniques to minimize both the volume and rate of runoff from this lot.
Yeah.
That's what it says. That's what he sent me.
I understand.
Yeah.
It sounds complicated. If there's a way to meet the intent with something that's a little broader and leaves it up to the discretion of the code enforcement office that says, does it have an adequate drainage plan? I would like it better.
He wants to minimize the total area of impervious surface.
Is that what's important?
The plan must demonstrate that the
I didn't know
proposed
that.
improvements are designed, where's that? The plan must demonstrate that the proposed improvements are designed to minimize the amount of stormwater leaving the site.
Oh,
That's a complete sentence.
Yes,
yeah.
and that's
Does
important.
that make sense?
How do you do that? Where does it go if it doesn't leave the site?
It
Stays
stays on
on
the
site.
site.
No,
Well,
Drained into the soils.
I guess if
What-
you have impervious surfaces, then it will leave the site. But if it will soak into the ground, then it's going to stay on the site.
and how is that proven?
So there is a calculation that is used for stormwater to determine pre-development versus post-development.
Yeah,
It's called the Q value. It's been used in engineering for decades now, since 1980s, and I'm sure you're probably familiar with it.
no,
No? So there are calculations, I do have them available that you can look at, that you can determine, okay, based on a storm flood and it's a certain frequency, because everything does run, water does run, even on grass and vegetative areas, it still runs.
absolutely.
So you have to determine what that is before development versus
I would
post-development.
think you'd like to say, you're changing the grading on the lot. Have you done reasonable things? Where's the water gonna go? Is it gonna impinge on you? Oh, there's no neighbors? Okay, end of story. You know, there are neighbors, oh, okay, gotta make sure that it doesn't go pouring onto his lot. There's a practical aspect
But
to
then you
this that I
gotta
think's being
include
met.
like the potential for neighbors.
Right, yeah.
Oh,
You have to be
okay, okay,
methodical, I think,
yeah.
about this with future planning,
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
so
yeah.
when you do these Q values, there's a certain calculation, it's a number. And then it shows post-development, this is the other number. So if post-development is greater than this, you need to do something to address
So,
this.
so let me just,
Yep.
I'm not smart enough to craft this language.
Mm-hmm.
That's a physics degree, not a civil engineering degree. If this came to the planning board and somebody said, well, look at, this is gonna take care of stormwater, we'd say, okay, fine. I'd like you to give me some money, we're gonna give it to Acorn Engineering and they're gonna validate this. I want a professional engineer to look at it. I don't like the idea that every excavation and every regrading in town is gonna have to go get a PE to sign off on it. I think that we've been doing all right, with some glaring exceptions, with stormwater management. Just, I'd like to be very careful about this. Could we at least have this language looked at by an engineering firm that specializes in stormwater management? Or is there someone in our Public Works Department who would look at it and say, yeah, that's exactly what we should be doing. This is what we do on our projects.
We have an engineer, we can certainly talk to him about that.
Let's
The other
let's
option.
be able to defend this language.
Right. The other option, again, this came from South Portland, so they're probably a little bit more aggressive with this than, and they have a lot more impervious
Oh,
surface
yeah.
than we do. So this definitely, this language did come from them. The other option that you can do, because this is for more lower impact development is what you're looking for. I mean, the state has guidance, manuals that you can use that, I'll use the example here. This is the basic LID, it's low impact development standard for new development. This is for a single family development. And so it says the disturbance of any individual lot with less than 15,000 square feet of building, driveway, walkways, lawn, access grading, and they give you suggestions on what you can do to the property, such as requiring that a minimum of 25% of the lot area must be maintained as undisturbed natural area, and that there's a vegetative buffer that's maintained down gradient of all developed area on the lot. Buffer shall be 35 feet wide if naturally forested and 50 feet wide if maintained with a natural meadow.
Sort of best management
That's
practices
a
type of approach.
It's a best management practice. It's something that's easier, user-friendly, and you can just, it's not.
Remember, we're talking about putting this in and then leveraging on it across the board to everything. So let's again be
A shed or.
doubly careful. Yeah,
Yep,
that's
they-
right.
They have it in here, yep.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And
So
again,
your
If you don't want to have a PE constantly doing these calculations, there is ways you can make this, it's more manageable.
for everybody's
and so what
garage.
you
and-
want to, your suggestion is to reference that guide
This was a
for-
little bit dated, but yeah, that's what I've been using for.
yeah, And you
But
gotta
it is
come in,
it is something from the town that we could, or the state that we could reference.
Yep, it's
so-
from Maine Coastal Program under the State Planning Office when they were still in existence, so that's,
so if I wanna bump out my garage,
we still have one.
I need to be able to go to the code enforcement office and say, yeah, my drainage plan is consistent with that, and look,
Yeah,
here's
you're
what
coming in for a
I've
building
done.
permit, and, yeah.
Yeah, well, if I can convince your guys,
Yeah.
then, to me, that ought to be good enough.
Yeah.
And they, they know their reputation's on the line, that, wait a minute, this is crazy what you're doing.
Yeah.
It needs a review. What people are doing needs a review. We're seeing that already. I don't think that putting all the bells and whistles on every excavation is the answer, though.
So would we put that, is the proposal to put that in instead of 1, 2, and 3? Galen?
I can do that, yep.
Because I was having trouble with 3.
Yeah,
Because
me
it
too.
seems like the very last sentence, somebody has a legal right to increase the flow of stormwater onto an adjacent lot. That just sort of was like, wow.
Yeah, that does happen on occasion, especially in commercial developments. They will either work out an agreement with the abutting property owner to put the stormwater improvements on that site if they can't make it work. So by way of background, I'll give you a little information. I came from the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Our towns were imposed that we had to control stormwater. So we already had an ordinance similar to this where we had to control all stormwater for even sheds or little, you wanted to do little flower beds and have little pavers, you had to control that stormwater on your property. And so it was quite an ordeal. I think the town eventually, I'm not forecasting this, but I do think that Kennebunkport will eventually become an MS4 community, which is going to be a very costly endeavor to undertake. And so the preventative
MS4?
municipal's stormwater systems. That's what that stands for. It's a federal permit that requires you to regulate how you're dealing with erosion and sediment control measures in your town. So storm events, wash away soil, it pollutes the water. So they make these permits that every town has to have. And every year you have to do something called a best management practice or any kind of project in your community to control the stormwater or address the erosion concerns in your community. And so it's quite a costly endeavor. It's millions of dollars that this costs. Luckily, towns have been more collaborative and they've done it on a county-wide approach. But if you did it on your own, it could be quite a costly endeavor, so.
And who triggers that? Does the state come in, does the DEP come in and say, ooh, you just tripped the wire and now you have to come up with this?
Yeah, so it used to be based off your urban density for your community, and I think they're looking at rulemaking to change that it's based off of a larger area that you need this permit. So it's quite a it's a scary thing. And yeah, I'm giving you a heads up that it's probably good that we're doing this, but there's gonna be probably some capital improvements in the future that's,
Well, and that was like the discussion that we were having before, and I don't want to revisit it, but I just want to tap back to it. You know, there are areas, like when we drove around and Chris was there with us, you know, there is no place to put the water, you know, other than let it run down into the harbor. And so I'm pretty sure those people probably treat their property with probably pesticides or something, and welcome to the harbor.
Yep.
So I think that's where, you know, when we've driven around, and that's the thing that keeps me worried, because we're stewards of our ocean and our waterways, and we have to be thinking through how we are handling our watershed. And that's why this part of it, I keep bringing it up, but that's the part that really rings true to me in terms of Augusta doesn't understand the situation that we're in. And they gave us nothing that we could reshape it. And that just feels very wrong, you know, because it's like, okay, we're trying to work in good faith, and we get no credit for heritage housing, you know, and the town already gave at the well for that, literally. So, and we want, you know, so it's like, okay, increase your density, not a good area to increase density, so close to the water. And then if we do trip that wire for the water runoff, it's like, we just keep going, it's like a pinball machine. You know, we're not feeling good at the end. We're the little ball getting nailed back and forth. Interesting. So you would just want to put a reference into that for this?
I can, yep.
Okay.
And I can clarify this to make it a little bit more simpler, because again, the challenge we're gonna run into is, okay, how complex of a development is this, that it's not considered a low-impact development versus, you know, something that needs something a little bit more robust of an engineer, you know, but again, with a shed. Yeah, I think we all agree, a shed is easy that's common sense, keep it simple.
And as you said before, once you go to the planning board as a subdivision.
Right, that's
then
covered.
Then you've got more leverage.
Right.
There's wording in there already that calls for a stormwater management plan.
Yep,
So, and rightly so. It's more complex at that point.
yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
So that takes us to, that covers this whole page then?
Yeah, there's just that subsection, there's an I right there. I wanted to cover that again. That's for an accessory apartment is allowed on a lot that's non-conforming, as long as it doesn't make the lot more non-conforming.
Yep.
This was not in LD 2003, it was in LD 1706. And so that was the clarifying language from the legislature that just helped to craft this. So that was something that is not in your accessory apartment when we looked at this before in prior years. So I wanted to point that out.
So this just means that, as we talked in the past, for a non-conforming lot, somebody can build an accessory apartment within the current structure.
Yeah, especially if it's like a lot coverage issue, that's gonna be, it's more interior at that point. That's the
Right.
good example I'd like to use for people is, you know, they don't have enough lot coverages, or they're already maxed out, they can't go anymore, so they can just do an internal. Yep.
All right, it's 8:03. Another good night of good conversations and debate on this topic. So we can at least thank our state legislature for a wonderful topic to discuss.
Oh, I wanted to mention too, and this is open to both the Growth Planning Committee and the Select Board if you so choose. I do have the contacts for the state DECD folks that I met. They are more than willing to do a presentation and answer any additional questions that you might have about LD 2003 and the requirements. So that offer stands from the state. We just need to coordinate with them when they would like to, when would work for you and for them to present. So I just wanted to throw that out there for you all.
Well, that might be a good thing to arrange between the Board of Selectmen, the GPC, and the Planning Board.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely, the public, but some type of
Yeah.
hybrid meeting.
yep.
Yeah, that would be interesting to have them come to like the first town meeting.
I don't know if I can get on that
What?
quick.
What do you mean, am I mean?
I'm not a miracle worker.
Did you see my horns came out? Oh, sorry, I thought I had my hair puffed up enough. Oh, man.
All right, so we'll make those changes to this section and we'll bring it back next time. Then maybe we'll do a vote on consistency.
Okay.
Okay,
That works.
all right. Any other business? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion. And we don't have Paul here, so Liz,
Sure, I motion to end our meeting at 8:05.
all right. I'll second. All in favor? Aye. Thanks all for joining. Thanks, Robin, for your input. Have a good night.
Including me. Appreciate it.
And thank you guys for joining from the planning board. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's helpful, very helpful.
No, thanks for joining us, because I wanted them to have that planning board perspective. Because there was that disconnect where we were discussing development, and I'm like,
I think they're feeling a little bit, behind the curve.
yeah.
Whoops.
Oh.